I read this quote the other day by a woman named Mandy Hale, and it goes like this: "Trust the wait, embrace the uncertainty, enjoy the beauty of becoming, for when nothing is certain, anything is possible." Those are both inspiring words and challenging words, and they're also very timely words, because right now we all know about that concept, don't we? Uncertainty. In fact, it's one of the buzzwords that we hear all the time these days. How often have we heard someone say, "We are living through uncertain times," or "During these uncertain times"? We've heard it so much we might be growing weary of hearing it. But we are, aren't we? That's a good word to describe it: uncertainty. And it's looming large on this Labor Day weekend. I mentioned in my sermon last week that I was in Kingston dropping my son off at school. He's living in a small house just off campus with 6 other engineering students, and yes, that is a terrifying prospect. But we dropped him off, and there was almost nobody around. It was like a ghost town. I compared it to a year ago when we dropped him off, and it was complete bedlam. Cars coming and going, horns beeping, police directing traffic, students standing on every street corner, immersed in their bags as they waited to move into their dorm rooms. What a difference a year makes. The difference, of course, is COVID, as Queens, along with most schools, has moved to a semester of almost all online learning. But I know it left me with an uncertain feeling as I said goodbye and wondered what was ahead for him in this school year. Uncertain times. And that is certainly a word on the minds of students and teachers everywhere this week as they make their way back to school, wondering what the fall is going to bring. In fact, I think it's safe to say that uncertainty is a permanent state of mind for anyone going through this pandemic, which means everyone. But even outside of this global crisis that we are living through, uncertainty is a part of life. We sometimes refer to it as the gray zones of life, neither here nor there. It's often characterized by anxiety, worry, a sense of being out of control. And it can be experienced as a result of all kinds of things in all areas of our life: relationships, health, in our workplaces, if we're going through changes in life. I have a friend in the middle of buying a house. He sold his house, but the deal hasn't closed on the house he wants to buy. And as he watches that date get closer and closer, that uncertainty and that anxiety gets higher and higher. We all know what uncertainty is like. Carl Sagan, the astrologer, or the astronomer, was once sent a telegram from a major American newspaper asking if he would immediately send them a statement on what he thinks about life on other planets. Or is there life on other planets? They said it had to be a maximum of 500 words. And so Carl Sagan wrote back, "Who knows?" And he wrote it 250 times. There's no question that we know what uncertainty is, and we don't really like it. It makes us uncomfortable. It's kind of like that yellow light on the traffic signal. You know, do we stop? Do we go? Do we try and get ahead? Do we pull back? Do we turn? We do so much better with a red or a green light. But we do spend a lot of time in life on yellow. But, like most things that make us uncomfortable, there's often another way to look at it. Is there another way to look at uncertainty? Again, let me go back to that quote by Mandy Hale. In fact, let me put it right up on the screen so you can read it for yourself. Listen again. Trust the wait. Embrace the uncertainty. Enjoy the beauty of becoming. For when nothing is certain, anything is possible. When nothing is certain, anything is possible. Interesting twist. Uncertainty, although we don't like it, can actually open up space for possibilities. So I thought for a few moments this morning, kind of maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, I thought I would see if we could turn this uncomfortable topic of uncertainty around and perhaps see if there's another way to look at this idea as we prepare for this uncertain season that is ahead of us. And the text that I'm using is the one that I read, the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel that's found in the book of Genesis. To put it in context, Jacob is, of course, the leader of his people. And as usual, they were on the move. Remember, the early Jewish people were nomadic people. So they were crossing into a new land. And Jacob sent his people, including his family, on ahead across the river. And then he stayed back alone, we assume, to perhaps watch for possible enemies. It was an uncertain time. Well, sometime in the night, he is approached by someone he assumes is a threat to his people, a stranger unknown to him. He engages with this stranger, and there is a physical fight. As dawn comes, the stranger is then revealed as an angel, in some translations as God. And God then comes to Jacob and tells him that he has prevailed over this being, and because he has, he's proven his worthiness. And from that day on, he would no longer be known as Jacob, but as Israel. He will become the father of a great nation. It's a bizarre story, but it's not one without precedent. In many ancient religious and spiritual traditions, there are tales of humans wrestling with divine or godlike figures. Usually it's a sign of human perseverance or a triumph of the human spirit, a test of worthiness. So that's why I'm calling this message today on dealing with uncertainty, wrestling with angels. And perhaps like Jacob, uncertainty, rather being the thing that defeats us, can be the doorway through which we are strengthened, changed, and maybe even forge a new identity. Or as someone once boldly proclaimed, what if uncertainty, rather than being the precursor to reaching a destination, is actually a destination in itself? Wow, that's a radical thought. So here we go, uncertainty, wrestling with angels. Just 3 points I'd like to make or share. Firstly, uncertainty can be a pathway that can lead to change in life. The story of Jacob takes pains to tell us that his struggle with the angel changed him. It changed him physically, and it changed his identity. He went in as Jacob, he came out as Israel. What uncertainty does, whatever it may be, is it shakes up our life. Whenever anything shakes us up, we can sometimes actually be enriched or challenged by what comes to the surface. I call this the Shirley Temple effect. Have you ever ordered a Shirley Temple in a restaurant? Maybe you did when you were a kid. It's ginger ale. I think there's sometimes lemonade in there. And then there's a secret ingredient that makes the Shirley Temple the Shirley Temple. It's that cherry-flavored grenadine. The grenadine, however, is heavier than the other liquids in the glass, so it always sinks to the bottom. You're going to be greatly saddened if you get your Shirley Temple, you stick your straw right into the bottom, because all you're going to get is that grenadine mixture. The first thing you have to do when you get a Shirley Temple is you have to mix it up to make it taste better. You know, things in all of our life at times can settle and stagnate. We can easily become complacent. And I know some of you are thinking, a little complacency right now may not be such a bad thing, and I hear you. But sometimes in life, you have to mix it up. Whether you mix it up in a glass, or in Jacob's case, you mix it up with an angel. It's not always a bad thing, because sometimes uncertainty stirs up feelings and ideas and possibilities that may long have been dormant, like the grenadine at the bottom of the glass. When your life is stirred, there's always an opportunity to usher in changes. And sometimes the greatest changes that stirring your life up can cause is a change in perspective. I read a neat little personal testimony this week of a young woman who went to law school. One of the reasons she wanted to go to law school was she liked the idea of being a lawyer. The reason being was because she liked order in her life. She liked control in her life. And she thought to herself, well, what is more ordered and controlled than the law? Very structured. She said on the first day, the professor told the class that they better get used to uncertainty because there's lots of gray zones when it comes to interpreting the law. This woman, whose name was Natalie, said that she felt everything in her body tense up when she heard the professor say that, because it was exactly the opposite of what she thought she was getting into. And sure enough, the more she studied the law, the more she realized that there was little that was certain. The result, she got more and more anxious, more and more worried, and struggled more and more to stay in control. She graduated from school, started to practice law, and found her anxiety was getting even worse. As she dealt with the clients, she came to see that even within the law, there were these huge gray zones in thought and action, even between people. She was not used to failing, but she discovered that she did often, that she couldn't help everyone that needed her. She struggled and struggled for control. Finally, 2 years into practicing law, she had a small breakdown. No longer able to keep up the facade of being in control, she became overwhelmed. A horrible time of wrestling with angels, but one in which she said led to the greatest discovery of her life. She said she came to realize that the only certainty in life is actually uncertainty, and she was fighting against this idea. The best way she decided that she could thrive and survive in this uncertain world was to let go of the need for control as the primary thing driving her life and replace it with what? Any ideas? Maybe you're yelling it at the TV screen. To replace it with gratitude. She didn't try to control everything in her life. Instead, she just tried to be grateful for everybody that came into her life, every opportunity that life presented to her, everything that happened. And she said it changed everything. It made her a better lawyer. It made her a more contented person because life stopped being a fight for control, and instead it became a journey of gratitude. How many of us need to hear that message today? How many of us are wrestling with that stranger of control? The angel in that fight may actually be gratitude. So uncertainty can change us, including our perspective. Secondly, uncertainty can be the mother of invention. At the cusp of uncertainty, remarkable things can happen because, once again, uncertainty can stimulate our minds, can actually get us to think in more creative ways rather than with the way we may think in more complacent or certain times, just like stirring up that Shirley Temple. I recently shared this quote with our Unified Board and with our transition team. I heard somebody say this on the news or the radio, and I thought, what a great quote. This person said this: "The word to describe the first chapter of COVID-19 is adaptation. The word that will describe the second chapter of COVID-19 is innovation. Adaptation becomes innovation." It's a thought-provoking quote. In other words, we've all had to learn over the past 6 months how to adapt to a new reality. And we have. Admittedly, some have fared better than others. But we are getting used to the way things are, whether we like them or not. And now, with experts telling us that this can go on for quite a while longer, we have to move into the next chapter, move from adaptation to innovation, so that we can keep living and thriving through this time of uncertainty. I always like to draw sometimes from the wisdom of other faith traditions and, not just our own. And this is going to be a first for me, but I'd like to draw for a moment from a story from the Mormon tradition, or the Church of Latter-day Saints. In the Book of Mormon, there's a book called Ether, and I hope that I've said that right. If you're from a Mormon background and I've said it wrong, forgive me. I believe it's pronounced Ether. There's a story in Ether that's similar to the story in Noah's Ark. God commands a man named Jared to build a boat that will sail across the ocean to bring believers to the land that we today call North America. As the story goes, Jared builds a boat as commanded, and when it's finished, he realizes something. There are no windows in the boat. Whether that was by error or design, we don't know. No windows. Uh-oh. Uncertainty. And along with that uncertainty comes the disciples of fear and worry and anxiety and turmoil. And so Jared cries out to God, and he says, God, there are no windows in the boat. Are we going to have to sail in darkness? How can we do that? Please help me. And guess what God says back to Jared? You figure it out. Here is this moment of uncertainty, and Jared wants God to figure it out for him. Instead of giving him the answer, God reminds him that he has the answers within. Not only that, but he has the creativity and the imagination and the wisdom to figure it out. At the cusp of uncertainty, remarkable things can happen. In uncertain times, we aren't called to run away or seek easy answers or give up, but to believe in ourselves and to trust in the skills and gifts that we already have to innovate, to find ways to move forward. Do you know what I love about teachers? So much. But to me, they are the most creative, innovative, and adaptable profession on the planet. Teachers understand gray zones, and they know uncertainty because they live it every day of their working lives. When you have a classroom of 30 unpredictable little people looking up to you for direction, each needing something different, you have to be on your game. You have to be able to change, innovate, and create on a dime. Teachers are masters of figuring things out as they go. Teachers know what it means to wrestle with angels. In fact, they could be the gold medalists. And that's why I have no doubt that our teachers will prove once again, as they have time and time again, that they can and they will adapt to this new reality this year. Because above all, teachers believe in their kids and they want the best for their kids. And I think this situation is going to bring out the best in so many people. You know, I love how the story of Jared and the boat ends. Do you know what Jared did? He innovated. He found 7 very large rocks and he put them in the boat. And then the Bible, or the book says that God reached down and touched the rocks and they glowed. And that was the light that allowed them to navigate their way across the ocean. Uncertain times call for creativity and innovation and the courage to try new things. When nothing is certain, anything is possible. And finally, uncertainty can actually strengthen our faith. At first, that sentence doesn't really sound right, because often what draws people to a life of faith or draws people to a church or a religious life is actually a search for certainty. In a destabilizing world, we look to something that we can hang our hats on, some certain unwavering truths that we can be sure will never change, even if everything changes around us. And so church often becomes an oasis from the world, if you will, a little slice of certainty during uncertain times. And the church is very good at providing that. We are very good at saying, here's the problem, and here's the solution. Do this, and that will happen. Be faithful, and good things will come your way. Just believe, and you will be blessed. But when we do that, we actually neglect a very important part of our faith, which is honoring uncertainty. Let me explain with a little illustration. I read this true story about a fairly well-renowned evangelical minister from the States who found himself in a city far away from home. He decided he wanted to go to church on Sunday, and as he couldn't go to a church from his own tradition, there wasn't one around, I think he was Pentecostal, he went to the church right beside the hotel where he was staying, and it was an Episcopalian church, or what we would call an Anglican church. Beautiful old stone building that had stood there for generations. So he goes into the church and he takes a seat and the service begins. And although it was a church, it was so different from the rituals and structures that he was used to, especially the music. Instead of a band singing praise music with guitar and drums, It was this beautiful old organ that thundered out the hymns. The first hymn they sang was called, "O God, why do you feel so far from me?" The congregation stood and began to sing. It was a nice enough hymn, but the minister noticed that each verse, although different lyrics, kept repeating the same theme. God, you seem so far away. Where are you? And so on and so forth. Well, the minister figured that by the end of the hymn, it would all turn around and it would give some kind of resolution or reassurance, like, God, we know you're not there, but you really are there all along. Nothing to worry about. But it never did. The hymn ended with the same question it started with. God, why do you feel so far from me? The minister described this hymn as unsettling his spirits. It was the churning of the Shirley Temple. At first he thought to himself, this is terrible. The church should be in the business of answering questions, not asking them. It should be about forging faith, not fueling doubt. The church should be reassuring its people, not stirring them up. Anyway, to this man's credit, it led him on a journey of rediscovering his own faith. He began to realize that he had days when he wasn't sure where God was. He had days of great personal uncertainty. And he realized that he'd always beaten himself up on those days, telling himself, just have more faith. As he read the Bible and read it through this new lens of uncertainty, he discovered something. He realized that the Bible itself is filled with expressions of uncertainty. In fact, an entire book of the Bible, the book of Psalms, is basically a testament to uncertainty. It's filled with phrases such as, God, why do you ignore my cries? Or, God, I am alone and I wait upon you. Even the phrase spoken by Jesus on the cross is originally found in the Psalms. My God, why have you forsaken me? This guy came to understand something. Uncertainty is not the enemy of faith. It is the doorway to authenticity. Let me say that again. Uncertainty is not the enemy of faith. It is the doorway to uncertainty, meaning it can be the doorway to an even deeper expression of faith. Here's what I mean by that. As human beings, we all have times of uncertainty, times of feeling distant from each other, times of feeling distant from God, times when we question everything. And sometimes we can say to ourselves, if only I had more faith. Do you know what we do to ourselves when we say that? We add one more problem to our lives. Instead, part of faith is being allowed to honor those questions and to honor that uncertainty. Part of faith is wrestling with angels, wrestling with our notion of God, wrestling with truth. It's okay to doubt, and it's healthy to express those doubts and to cry out to God. And when we do that, when we let go of that need to have all those answers, when we let go of that frustration and worry and uncertainty, we can actually feel in its place a greater sense of peace, the drawing closer to an authentic expression of the divine. If there's one thing the story of Jacob and the angel reveals to us about faith or a life of faith, it is this. Faith, real living faith, is not a slavish adherence to certain principles. It is a willingness to engage with life, a willingness to wrestle with uncertainty. It is a constant willingness to struggle with the strangers of fear and doubt and worry in real and authentic ways. It is a crying out to God. It is a release of tension and a relinquishing of control. For when we allow ourselves to be completely open and honest before God, we may just discover that the stranger we're wrestling with begins to change. And as dawn breaks, we discover that the angel was in the very struggle itself, allowing for something wonderfully new to emerge. The first step to real, authentic, engaged living is crying out, honoring uncertainty, and then letting it break open, something deep and profound and wonderful within you, a new and authentic expression of life. The philosopher-theologian Peter Abelard put it this way: the beginning of wisdom is found in doubting. By doubting, we come to the question. By seeking, we stumble upon the truth. Whew, that point took a lot out of me. Anyway, let's bring this to a close today. It is Labor Day. It is a transition time. We are about to enter a season of uncertainty. None of us knows what the next few months are going to bring. And there may be times when we feel like we are wrestling with a stranger. Times when we might feel stirred up and anxious. So maybe instead of beating ourselves up, we simply need to honor that uncertainty and all the feelings that come with it. And never underestimate the possibility that something positive can come out of uncertain times. That sometimes the stranger that we wrestle with can actually be an angel in disguise. Like the lawyer who wrestled with the stranger of control and discovered the angel of gratitude. Like Jared, who wrestled with the stranger of failure and discovered the angel of innovation. Like that minister who struggled with the stranger of doubt and discovered the angel of authentic faith. Trust the wait, embrace the uncertainty, enjoy the beauty of becoming, for when nothing is certain, everything is possible. Amen.